Hello and welcome to the third in this series of conversations, 10 conversations for 10 years, celebrating 10 years of applying quality improvement at East London Foundation Trust. I'm really delighted to be joined by Marie Gabriel and Navina Evans for this conversation, which is going to focus specifically on the board's role in leading improvement. Many of you will know Marie and Navina already, but Marie was chair of the East London Foundation Trust board for many years, right at the outset of this journey from 2012 through to 2020. And Navina was the chief operating officer of the trust at the start of this journey and then moved into the chief executive role in 2016 through to 2020. So both have many years of experience at the board leading this journey. And it's a real pleasure and privilege to have you joining us for this conversation, Marie, Navina. Thank you for coming along and joining us.
Thank you, Amar. Hi, Marie. It's really nice. Just your introduction has brought back some memories for us.
I'm really excited to be here and actually to be with two of my favourite people. Still really excited about QI and the power of it to create sustainable change, positive change.
Wonderful. I know our listeners are going to have lots of interesting questions and curiosity about what it is about the ELFT board that has enabled it to sustain this journey and to lead it over so many years. I wonder, Marie, whether you could start us off by thinking back to those early days. What I hear from many parts of the world is that there's a lot of enthusiasm for improvement, but often people feel like it isn't replicated at boards and that the boards aren't completely and sufficiently behind the work of improvement. And I wondered, from your experience in East London and elsewhere, what you have found to be the best ways to enable a board to see the value that quality improvement can bring.
Thanks for the question, Amar. Actually, I think it's more than them seeing the value. I think it's actually about them leading that discussion and seeing it as core to their work and core as part of everything that they do. So it was part of a conversation in East London that we'd already were having about how do we improve our services, how do we keep on doing well as an organisation and move towards an outstanding effective organisation. And we had a really good debate about the what next and what that should look like. And we were really fortunate that people raised the idea of quality improvement. And we actually did quite a lot of work around, well, what kind of quality improvement do we want to do? What would be right for East London Foundation Trust? And the board led that conversation, that debate. We went off and looked at different sites. Some of you went to some very nice places in Europe. I went to cold places in the north. But to really see QI in action, to start to define what QI should look like for us at ELFT and how it could be embedded in the way we do things around here, included some rather heated debates as well.
Yeah, I remember those. And actually, Marie, when you talk about heated debates, it's because it requires a culture shift in the way in which teams and the board is a team really, and how you work. And for me, the heated debates were due to the fact that it was almost like insulting, as if we weren't trying our hardest to improve quality anyway. You know, people's life's work was looking after patients and delivering care. So when you introduce the idea of, you know, that we need to go and learn how to do quality improvement, it felt like a bit of a slap. And I think I was one of those people in the early days that didn't quite get what it meant. And what it meant really was a fundamental shift in our culture of leadership, of curiosity, of assurance, of scrutiny, everything that a board does, but right the way through the organization. And that for me was the biggest light bulb moment.
And I think, Amar, it's really important for that board to take that leadership role, because then you're setting an objective, you know, in consultation with the whole organisation in a very engaged way, to actually say that together, this is how we're going to ensure with the people who use our services, this is how we're going to transform care. and actually how we work with you. So I think that was a really important thing. And I think other organisations that don't have that board commitment from the outset, I think they have teams that struggle a bit more to make QI more systematic. And it also meant we were wiser about the model that we developed, because we looked at all the different models. We were curious about them. We were able, which I thought was a really positive relationship with IHI, not only agree to financial investment, but also investment of our time and our energies in defining a model that worked for ELFT, one that was really embedded in an understanding of how you co-produce with service users, how you work alongside staff, how it's driven by the front lines. I think that's a really important part of being part of that first defining. And I think it also meant that our QI objectives were two-pronged. I think it went beyond patient safety, which it's critical and always will be critical, but was the debate back in 2012 to also right care, right place, right time.
And so I'm hearing that those conversations, some of which were difficult conversations in the early days, were really important for the board to grapple with what it meant and how they would lead this and how they would define the way in which the organisation actually went about improving. And taking the time to have those conversations itself was a really important process. What have you seen over the years about how that's impacted on the actual work of the board? How has the board changed in the way it actually functions and interacts with the rest of the organisation as it's gone from a largely assurance-focused board to a more improvement-focused board?
I mean, obviously, I'm not there anymore, but I watch from where I am what's going on, and I can see that it's there's constant effort to do that. And what I remember, Marie, was that, again, we had to check ourselves as an executive team, and then the whole board as well. We had those debates, didn't we? Those conversations about grip and just do it. If you can do it here, why can't you just make the whole organization do something that works? We had to grapple with it. In my view, it was quite a struggle, but we spent a good amount of board development and strategy time thinking about this. And I found it really helpful having the kind of non-executive buy-in in the way that we did.
I think for me, I really took a lot of time to think about what would a quality improvement board look like and how would that be different to how we were before. So that meant sending out a really clear signal to organisations. So at every lunchtime, in a very open way, our board meetings would have a QI presentation. So, embedding that idea that QI is the way that we do things. It meant some real training, so the whole day with my head hurting, looking at understanding run charts. So there's a technical aspect to it as well. But it's also thinking about how we use QI methodology as a board to answer some of our problems. So not just sort of service delivery, but also things like financial problems that we might be having. It was actually about how you ask questions differently, and it led to us thinking, well, for me as a chair, thinking differently about who I had around the table. So, a different understanding of risk and risk appetite, which I didn't imagine when we first started, was one of the consequences. So we went out to look for a very sort of entrepreneurial person to become a non-executive director, because they have a different view of what risk is or risk appetite. And I think, pushing yourself as a board to think differently has been really, really important part of learning and how we grew and developed. It also meant, sort of very technically, for a chair, it's about looking at our committees and how our committees themselves do quality improvement. And so, yes, definitely, that was something we looked at quality, so it became a quality improvement committee. But it was also things such as our committee that works with our service users, our people participation committee, about how do we take on improvement projects and look at its work in an improvement way.
Yeah. And Marie, also the reports, we had to work on the administration. We changed the nature of our reports, didn't we, to reflect improvement rather than just performance linked to improvement. Yeah.
If you look over such a long time span, there's such a number of changes in the way that people think and ask questions and behave and lead an organization. For organizations that are slightly earlier on in the journey, they might be wondering what might be the early things that we could do. Both of you are in roles now where you're leading large parts of the health and care system, and you will be seeing organizations at different levels of progress with adopting improvement. What might be your advice to board chairs and board chief executives who are looking to take their first steps in this direction? What do you think might be the most important things to focus on first?
So I think it is that board commitment. So make sure it's central to what you do as a board and how you conduct your business. I think that's the first thing. I think it is about taking time to agree what your ambition is, but also what your approach is to improvement, because there are different approaches and what fits your organisation. Increasingly, NHS, we work in a system way. So I know in North East London now, and ELFT are taking a leading role in this, we're having conversations about what does a quality improving integrated care system look like when you have local government and the voluntary sector who you want as equal partners, but have a different language around improvement. So how do you together sort of shape what improvement would mean to you? I think the final thing I'll say is actually about making it simpler, because when we first started, it seemed to be so complex and so huge. And actually, it isn't. A lot of it is really good practice. And PDSA, I remember working with the Council of Governors, is quite a straightforward way of doing things. So demystifying it a bit, I think, is really important. But particularly making sure it's led from the front line, both those who deliver care at that front line and those who use those services.
Can I just pick up on two things that Marie said, which I completely want to reinforce? One is that kind of early hard graft with the board, and not assuming that everybody gets this or everybody thinks it's worth, even if it's not financial, the change in commitment, the change in tone, the change in culture, because you're actually telling each other as a board, and if you're a unitary board, this is part of our development. Well, we are unitary boards, all of us. So this is part of our development, and there's a commitment to be made. There will be skeptics, and we've got to just allow the skepticism to emerge. And because, like I said, I was one of them. So, and if I had been just shut down, well, it would have gone underground and gone somewhere else. So I think that is a really important thing that, Marie, you made us all work really hard at. And that's where some of the heated discussions were, I think. And that was really, really important, because that commitment needs to be sustained. And then the thing that you said about the front line and the patients, so that the work that was done around building the will, which was a lot of energy and so much hope and excitement, which really, it's like you start the ball rolling and you can't stop it.
Okay, but a lot of people will look at the ELFT journey and say, well, you part of what enabled you to do this was the investment you had to make. You had to put in some financial investment and some time investment to bring in the IHI to help, to create a team, to build expertise. Both of those things, finance and time, are pretty difficult to find these days. So is this possible to do when we're as busy as we are today and with not as much financial resource perhaps to invest in something like this?
So when you think about how much money an organization has, and actually the proportion that you need to invest, it's value, it's worth it. And also when you think about waste and how much we spend on not how much we would potentially save, and how much we spend on not doing this kind of work. So I think there's a business case which can be made, which is in my view obvious. And similarly, in terms of time, we waste a lot of time, and so there is we get a gift actually of time once you start getting into this journey. But initially, it does feel like a huge commitment. That is true. So there's something about holding your resolve, and making sure you're able to demonstrate that you're getting a return on your investment.
I actually think now is exactly the time that we should be doing this. So money is really tight, and we're being asked to be more productive. How do you be more productive other than through an improvement approach? Because improvement is also about minimizing waste. It's about using your whole workforce and those who use services to actually say, where were we creating this waste? How can we be more productive? I can remember sitting down and our children and adolescent mental health services showing us the pathway, the really complicated pathway to get access, which QI enabled them to really streamline and make it easier for everybody, actually. And and that did save money. I know that at ELFT, we also use that methodology when we were thinking about becoming a more productive organisation. So for me, it's how can you not? Really, to be honest, because you need some tools to help with this thinking. And as money, I can't see improving over the next few years. How do we ensure that we maintain high quality and continue to improve quality if we don't have an improvement mindset and improvement built into our culture?
And I think the landscape's different now. When I think back 12 years and where we could learn from, where we could get support from this kind of work, there were very few places. And actually now you don't need to look very far to see examples and resources and expertise that you can draw from. It's certainly in England. So there's plenty of options now, I think, for organisations to think about how they can build their own capacity and capability. But you're absolutely right. If we're going to tackle these really complex problems, I don't know what our alternative is other than to involve the people closest to the point of care and helping us find better ways. And this is one really good vehicle to do that, isn't it? I guess one question I wanted to ask you both was about succession planning, because one of the major risks to this kind of approach is that people change naturally. And, you sometimes have a new chair or a new chief executive, and they come with their own ideas and philosophy of how to lead. And an approach like this can easily shift and be lost with the advent of something new. And I wonder what you feel about how this organisation in East London has held on to this philosophy and mindset and approach over many, many years with multiple changes in leadership roles at the board. How has that been enabled? I'm presuming it's not an accident that that's happened. There must have been some thought and some approach that's sustained this over time.
We were really clear, I think, sort of about succession planning, but also in the very, very beginning, this wasn't just about the board or about individuals. This was about a whole organisation. It was about a shifting culture, and it's about a mechanism for enabling change. So I think that was part of why we had the build the will, the spread the skills, the embedding, what I can't remember the term we used, but what are we going to scale up to really ensure that work continues? How are we going to build it into teams? So teams were leading this work on the board. So it's the way that approach was a key thing. But also, I think it relates to what I said earlier. It's about how we looked for people. So, as we've continued to create change, and, not everybody left at the same time, thankfully, but you're able to sort of say, well, we want people who've got that improvement mindset. And that's going to be a key skill and commitment that we're going to look for in whoever that we recruit. It's also that as ELFT, we've had a real commitment to succession planning internally. So a lot of grow your own of individuals, and actually individuals have gone on and done it, improvement in organisations. But that's also been really core to how we've operated as an organisation. So I think that's been quite important in terms of continuing the drive that we should remain committed to QI.
Yeah, I think it's still the case. I mean, I've not been there for a while, but it feels like it's still the case. But when Marie and I were there, we did try very hard, and we made sure that we built it into our recruitment, because we were very open with people. This is the culture that is being built in this organization. And if you can't, get into that improvement mindset, continuous improvement QI, if you can't really be honest about people participation, moving into real partnership and co-production was the ambition. If inclusion wasn't in your head as how you want to be, this isn't the organization for you. And so, people welcoming people, and a lot of people would say when they wanted to come to ELFT, this was one of the things that attracted them about ELFT. So it's very open. If it's not for you, it's not, don't. But and I think, but what I'm seeing though, Amar, is that it's a never-ending effort, because what you also allude to is the fact that it can slip away if you don't continuously keep at maintaining this way of being and this way of doing business.
I wondered if I might ask you both to look into the future next. Both of you are in very influential roles in England. What do you see on the horizon that systems and providers and regional teams are going to need to be thinking about and grappling with as they consider how to support the adoption of improvement? We have, a national framework for this now, which we haven't had in the past for some time, the NHS IMPACT framework, and a genuine desire to support adoption of improvement at scale across the whole country. What do you see as sort of the big things that providers and systems and regions will need to be grappling with over the next 2 or 3 years?
Okay. It's really interesting. I think it's great that we've got a framework and that national commitment and expectation. I think that's really important, because it helps me now as the chair of an integrated care system to point to that as a way in. But actually what I found as we move towards the future is that it's different, moving from an organisation as a system to one as a system that's multiple partners, and some of whom are quite tied to their methodology and actually trying to share that across. For others in the voluntary sector, for example, this is a new way of doing things. They've had their own way of improvement, but it's a new way and actually a new language. And that's just as true for local government. But in our conversations, it has been therefore more about how do we approach this as a partnership, and a partnership with our residents. And how do we make sure we can develop that common language and make it simple and actually in a way that will integrate care? So these different organisations coming together to tackle population health and to ensure we have an integrated service. So I think going into the future, it could look more complex, but it's actually about how we get all those stakeholders around the table committing to building that will, actually, developing those shared skills. So I think every system's going to need to have a team of people, and thank you for Amar for helping my system, that are going to come together to try and be an engine room to help that. Every integrated care board and the partnership boards are going to have to have a conversation about what does improvement look like for us, because although you've got that national framework, it's an NHS framework, so it's about working with people like Dennis Skinner at the local government association to help us build that as a real national movement, because I do believe QI is a movement, a real national movement where we can see those better outcomes. I think integrated care systems with their 4 strategic aims actually they have to have an improvement approach, because it is about population health inequalities. It is about quality of services and wider determinants, and it is about partnership.
Yeah. Marie, can I just add to what you've absolutely outlined there? The national framework, I believe, is actually us beginning to respond to something that we know is coming, change. The way in which we deliver health and care is changing, and it's changing in a way that we need to keep up. The way people live is different. The conditions that we live with, our expectations, the populations that we serve, their relationship with us as care providers is different. The paternalistic relationship is not the way it's going to be in the future. So therefore, we've got to find a different way of providing the care that people need. And I think that this gives us a real opportunity. So the challenge, in my view, is for leadership. The second is a real challenge to the status quo. How do we do things differently? And the third is how we use our resources really wisely, because there's not going to be unlimited, and there shouldn't be, money, workforce, medicines. We need to, this is all precious stuff. Um, so so the future is to find a way, and the QI way brings people together. It energizes people. It brings hope, and it makes everyone have a stake in doing the right thing with our resources. I think it's really exciting.
I have had the privilege of working with both of you at ELFT for many years, and I personally experienced just how supportive and encouraging you've both been. And I know how influential both of your leadership has been on this organization's journey. But I wondered whether you might just reflect a little bit on what you've taken with you beyond ELFT. And when you look back to your time at ELFT and some of the work you led in helping us become more and continuously improving, what memories do you still hold on to from that time that sort of continues to bring you joy and hope in the work you're doing now at much broader, larger scale?
There's so many to choose from, but I'll pick three. I still remember individual stories that I can tell, of small things that were done using this methodology that empowered our service users, their families, and our staff to make big difference. And how the wonderful, that impact of that was just wonderful. The second thing for me was how actually, as a board, I think a lot of the success of the organization, financial outcomes, the learning culture, continuously wanting to improve and deal with problems and difficulties in a different way, that was really important to me and shaped me, actually. And then the third thing for me was that it was so much fun. And we don't allow ourselves to have fun in the work that we do, but it's really important. And that's everybody: patients, service users, our families, the communities. And yeah, I really think back with fondness.
I think for me, definitely fun. And I love to have fun. But also, I think the deepening of relationships, because being on the improvement journey means you have more open relationships. I think you're more curious. You want to hear from the other person. You find different ways of expressing that together. And there's a really, it's that joint endeavor towards a shared goal. Was you could touch it, you could feel it. People used to come on visits and say, we can tell the difference. You can taste it in the air. And I think that is something incredible. And actually, that's something I've not been able to leave behind. So everywhere I go, I'm trying to infect everybody with, we've got to do improvement. And that has been something that I continue in all sorts of conversations that I have. And as even ones that are not specifically the NHS, like the Race and Health Observatory, we've got to have an improvement approach because we've got to implement this change. So I think, that, the joy of having this shared endeavour and having a good time doing it and building really good, deep relationships that you continue. I think being able to take it into new organisations and new ways of work, new sort of systems, and has been really, really good fun too. And actually, the fact is that once you are involved in this movement, that you've got a fellowship. It sounds a bit religious. I don't mean it to, but it but it is a fellowship, and I'm not ashamed of being religious. But it's like a fellowship of people that I have met along the way, who I know I can reach out to, who will help and support, because we're all committed to achieving with our people and communities the best possible outcomes. So yeah, I don't think like I don't feel like the ELFT journey is over. I think it's a continual one.
It certainly is. And that's really powerful. Thank you both for sharing. It's been a real privilege to harness some of your nuggets of wisdom. I know how helpful they'll be for those who are listening from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, who are on a similar journey and are thinking about the same challenges that you've just helped us think through and given us some ideas and wisdom about. So, Marie, Navina, huge thanks from me to you both for giving up the time to join us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been reinvigorating for me too. So it's been lovely to have a great way to start off 2024.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next episode soon.